Maybe have you ever walked into your own birthday party, only to leave feeling like you never belonged anywhere? That's exactly what happened to me. I thought I was celebrating my 25th birthday with the people who had raised me. Instead, my father stood up in the middle of the restaurant, raised his champagne glass, and told everyone, "From today forward, you're no longer our child." The room went silent. I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. It wasn't. Then, just as I was walking out in tears, a woman sitting 3 tables away called my name. The strange part? I'd never met her before. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "We've been looking for you for 25 years. My name is Olivia Harper. Until my 25th birthday. I believed I knew exactly who I was. I was an only child, raised in Portland, Oregon. My father, Richard, owned a construction company. My mother, Diane, worked as a real estate agent. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Inside the house, things were very different. My parents were never affectionate. They paid for school, bought birthday presents, made sure I had food and clothes, but love always felt conditional. If I earned good grades, they were pleased. If I made a mistake, I heard about it for weeks. Whenever I asked why they treated me differently than other parents treated their children, Mom always answered, "You're too sensitive." So, eventually, I stopped asking. There was one person who always made me feel loved. My grandmother, Dad's mother. Grandma Evelyn. She never missed a birthday. Every year she baked my favorite chocolate cake from scratch. She always told me, "You were brought into this family for a reason." I never understood what she meant. I thought she was simply being kind. Looking back, I realize she knew far more than she ever said. Grandma passed away 6 months before my 25th birthday. The house felt colder after that. Mom became distant. Dad buried himself in work. Sometimes days passed without us eating dinner together. Then, 2 weeks before my birthday, Dad surprised me. "We're having a family dinner." "For me?" He nodded. 25 is an important birthday. Mom smiled. We invited everyone. It felt strange. My parents had never organized a birthday dinner before. But part of me felt hopeful. Maybe Grandma's passing had reminded them that family mattered. Maybe things were finally changing. Saturday evening arrived. The restaurant was beautiful. Large crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. A pianist played softly in the corner. Fresh flowers decorated every table. Private dining rooms lined one side of the building. The hostess smiled. "Happy birthday, Miss Harper." I laughed. "Thank you." When I entered our reserved room, nearly 20 relatives stood and applauded. My aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, even neighbors I'd known since childhood. For the first time in years, I actually felt special. Dinner began. Everyone laughed, shared stories, passed around old family photos. Dad even made a toast. To Olivia. "We're proud of the woman you've become." Hearing those words almost brought tears to my eyes. He had never said he was proud of me before. Not once. I smiled. Maybe tonight really was different. As the evening continued, I noticed something unusual. Mom kept checking her watch. Dad looked distracted. Several relatives avoided eye contact with me. Even my favorite aunt seemed nervous. It felt rehearsed. Like everyone knew something I didn't. I tried ignoring the feeling. When dessert finally arrived, the lights dimmed, A giant birthday cake appeared. Everyone sang. I blew out the candles. The waiter handed Dad a champagne glass. He tapped it gently with a spoon. I'd like everyone's attention. The room became quiet. I smiled, expecting another birthday speech. Instead, Dad looked directly at me. His face carried no emotion. Olivia, there is something we've hidden from you. I frowned. What? Mom stood beside him. She didn't take my hand. She didn't smile. She simply said, "You deserve to know the truth." My heart began racing. Dad took a slow breath. "You are not our biological daughter." The words didn't register. What? You were adopted. I stared at him. No. That's impossible. Mom folded her arms. It's true. I looked around the room. Nobody looked surprised. Not one person. Every relative already knew, except me. Tears filled my eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Dad answered coldly. Because it wasn't important. It wasn't important? You lied to me for 25 years. Mom sighed. We didn't lie. We just never talked about it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then Dad said something that shattered me completely. There's another reason we wanted everyone here tonight. I whispered. What reason? He looked around the room before saying, as of today, we no longer consider you part of this family. I felt the world stop. What? You heard me. Grandma was the only reason we kept pretending. She asked us to raise you. She's gone now. So we're done. The room was silent. Some relatives looked down at the table. Others pretended not to hear. Not a single person defended me. I looked at my mother. She didn't cry. She simply nodded. We've done our responsibility. It's time for you to live your own life. I stood so quickly, my chair fell backward. You waited until my birthday. To tell me this? Dad answered without emotion. It seemed appropriate. I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I couldn't breathe. I walked toward the restaurant exit. Each step felt heavier than the last, just before I reached the front doors. A soft voice stopped me. Excuse me. I turned around. An elderly woman was standing beside a nearby table. She had silver hair, kind eyes, and tears streaming down her face. She looked at me as though she'd seen a ghost. Then she quietly asked, Were you born? On April 18th, 1999? I froze. Yes. She covered her mouth. Oh my God. Behind her, 3 tables away, 7 people slowly stood up. Every one of them was staring at me. Some were crying. One young man whispered, It can't be. The elderly woman slowly reached into her purse. She pulled out a faded photograph, then held it beside my face. The baby in the picture had the exact same birthmark on her left wrist that I had. The woman's voice trembled as she whispered, Olivia, I think we're your family. Reduce a text-to-speech clip that sounds like a thoughtful interview response. Use a warm, conversational voice with natural pacing, clear pronunciation, and slight pauses for reflection. Add subtle emphasis on important points and soft breaths to maintain realism. Ideal interview clips, 20-30 seconds. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The restaurant around me faded into silence. The elderly woman stood only a few feet away, clutching an old photograph with trembling hands. She looked at me the way someone looks at a miracle they stopped believing in years ago. Behind her, 7 people slowly stood from their table. Some were crying. Others simply stared. I whispered, What is happening? The woman took one careful step toward me. My name is Margaret Lawson. My sister was your birth mother. My heart stopped. No, that's impossible. She nodded through tears. I know this sounds unbelievable. But please, just give me 5 minutes. I looked back toward my parents. Neither of them had followed me. They remained seated. Dad avoided looking in my direction. Mom stared down at her coffee cup, almost as if none of this concerned them anymore. That hurt more than anything. Margaret gently held out the faded photograph. This was taken 2 days after you were born. I looked down. A young woman was lying in a hospital bed. She looked exhausted, but incredibly happy. In her arms was a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby had a tiny dark birthmark on her left wrist. Exactly like mine, my hands began shaking. I have that birthmark. Margaret nodded. I know. Another man stepped forward. He appeared to be around 50. I'm David. I'm your biological uncle. He reached into his wallet, carefully removing an old plastic hospital bracelet. Across the faded label was a handwritten name. Baby girl Lawson birth date. April 18th, 1999 Hospital Disowned. Mary's Medical Center. I stared at it in disbelief. It matched my birthday exactly. My voice barely came out. How? How do you have this? David smiled sadly. Because your mother kept everything. She believed she'd find you someday. I frowned. What do you mean? Find me? Margaret looked confused. You don't know? I slowly shook my head. No. She looked toward the rest of her family before speaking. Olivia, your mother never gave you away. Those words hit me like lightning. What? She never abandoned you. She never signed adoption papers. I felt dizzy. My parents told me I was adopted, Margaret whispered. Then they lied. At that moment, my father suddenly stood up from his table. He walked quickly toward us. His face looked pale. That's enough. Margaret looked directly at him. No. It's 25 years overdue. Dad pointed toward her. You need to leave. David stepped between us. I don't think so. The entire restaurant had gone silent. Every customer was watching. Mom finally walked over. She forced a nervous smile. Olivia, please don't listen to strangers. Margaret opened her purse again. This isn't coming from strangers. She removed a thick envelope tied with a blue ribbon. Across the front, written in faded handwriting, were the words, "For my daughter." My knees nearly gave out. Mom's face immediately changed. Where did you get that? Margaret looked at her calmly. My sister wrote this in 1999. It has never been opened. Dad suddenly stepped forward. Give me that. Margaret pulled the envelope back. No, it belongs to Olivia. For the first time all evening, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Real fear. The restaurant manager quietly approached. Is everything all right? Margaret nodded politely. We're fine. We've simply found our niece. The manager looked confused, then glanced toward my parents. Dad immediately said, This woman is mistaken. Margaret smiled sadly. Am I? She reached into another folder. This time, she removed several photographs. One showed a pregnant young woman. Another showed the same woman decorating a nursery. Another showed her holding a newborn for the first time. Every picture was dated. Every date matched my birth. Then David unfolded a newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local family searches for missing newborn. My heart pounded. Missing, not adopted. Missing. I looked at my parents. Neither of them said a word. I slowly turned back to Margaret. My birth mother, Where is she? Tears rolled down her cheeks. She searched for you for 11 years. Every birthday. Every Christmas. She never stopped. I whispered. Then why didn't she find me? Margaret lowered her head. She passed away from cancer. 3 years ago, the world around me seemed to stop. I had spent 25 years believing I had been unwanted. Meanwhile, a woman I'd never met had spent her life looking for me. I couldn't stop crying. Margaret carefully placed the envelope into my hands. I promised your mother that if I ever found you, this would be the first thing you received. The envelope felt fragile, like it had been waiting for me my entire life. Dad suddenly reached toward it. You can't give her that. Before he could touch it, a voice came from behind us. I think she has every right to read it. Everyone turned. A man in a gray suit had entered the restaurant. He held a leather briefcase. He looked directly at me. My name is Thomas Green. I'm an attorney. I've represented the Lawson family for 22 years. He placed several official documents on the nearest table, then looked directly at my parents. I also believe it's time to explain why your adoption records were sealed. My parents' faces turned completely white. I looked down at the unopened letter in my hands. Then back at the attorney. What do you mean? Sealed. He took a slow breath. Because, according to the records, your adoption should never have happened. The entire restaurant gasped, and with trembling hands. I slowly broke the seal on the envelope my birth mother had written. 25 years earlier, the envelope shook in my hands. It was old. The edges had turned yellow with time. The blue ribbon around it looked as though it had been tied decades ago. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were 4 words that made my chest tighten. For my daughter, Olivia. My biological mother had written this 25 years ago, long before I even knew she existed. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. What if everything I'd believed about my life was a lie? Then again, it already was. The attorney, Thomas Green, spoke softly. You should read it, I nodded, carefully breaking the old wax seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, as if someone had protected it with incredible care. I unfolded it. The first line blurred through my tears. My beautiful Olivia, if you're reading this, then somehow we've found each other. If we haven't, then I hope someone kept this promise for me. I swallowed hard. The restaurant around me disappeared. Only the letter mattered now. The day you were born was the happiest day of my life. You had my eyes, your father's smile, and the tiniest birthmark on your left wrist. Without thinking, I looked down at my wrist. The small birthmark I'd had my entire life suddenly meant something. The letter continued. 3 days after your birth, the hospital told us you had stopped breathing. They told us you had died. My heart stopped. No, that couldn't be right. I kept reading. They refused to let us see you. They refused to let us hold you one last time. They said everything had already been handled. I looked up at Margaret. She was crying. They told her you died? Margaret nodded slowly. For years. That's what we believed. My hands began shaking uncontrollably. I looked at my parents. Dad's face had turned pale. Mom wouldn't look at me. I returned to the letter. I never believed them. Something in my heart told me my little girl was alive. Every birthday, I bought you a present. Every Christmas, I left one gift unopened beneath the tree. Your grandparents thought I was losing hope, but I wasn't. I was waiting. Tears streamed down my face. For 25 years, someone I had never met had loved me every single day. Thomas Green quietly placed another folder on the table. Olivia, I think it's time you saw these. Inside were copies of old newspaper articles, missing child reports, private investigator receipts, letters sent to hospitals across 3 different states. There were hundreds of pages. Every single year, my birth family had searched for me. They never stopped. One receipt caught my attention. A private investigator had been hired when I was 10 years old. Another when I turned 16. Another on my 21st birthday. They had spent thousands of dollars searching. Not because they wanted something from me, because they wanted me. I slowly looked toward my parents. Did you know? Neither answered. I asked again. Did you know? Finally, Dad spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. The word hit harder than anything else that night. You knew my family was looking for me? He nodded slowly. We found out years later. And you never told me? No. Why? He closed his eyes. We were afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd leave. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So instead, you lied. For 25 years. Mom suddenly burst into tears. We loved you. I looked directly at her. Then why wait until my birthday to throw me away? She had no answer. Thomas Green opened another folder. This is where things become more complicated. Inside were copies of adoption paperwork. The attorney pointed to several signatures. These documents were filed 25 years ago. But they don't match hospital records. What does that mean? It means there are serious inconsistencies. He pointed again. The biological mother's signature appears to have been completed on a day she was still admitted to intensive care. Margaret whispered, she couldn't even hold a pen. The attorney nodded. Exactly. Dad suddenly stood. This has gone far enough. He grabbed his jacket. We're leaving. Before he reached the exit, 2 people entered the restaurant. One wore a navy suit. The other carried a badge. Mr. Richard Harper? Dad froze. Yes? My name is Detective Elena Ruiz, and this is Investigator James Collins from the State Adoption Review Unit. The room became completely silent. The detective held up a folder. We've reopened several historical adoption cases. She looked directly at my parents. Your daughter's file is one of them. Mom looked terrified. What? What does that mean? It means we've located original hospital records that were never included in the adoption file. The investigator stepped forward. He looked at me kindly. Olivia, we're not saying anyone in this room committed a crime, but we are saying the paperwork surrounding your adoption contains enough irregularities to require a full investigation. My heart pounded. Everything I knew about my life was unraveling. Thomas Green quietly smiled. I've waited 22 years to hear someone finally say those words. The detective nodded. We've already petitioned the court. The judge has approved access to the sealed adoption records. I frowned. When? She answered. Tomorrow morning. Dad suddenly interrupted. You can't reopen sealed files. The investigator calmly replied, We already have. He handed Dad an official court notice. Dad's hands trembled as he read it. For the first time in my life, my father looked completely defeated. Before leaving, the detective turned toward me. There is one more thing. She handed me a small evidence envelope. Inside was the tiny silver bracelet that had been placed on my wrist the day I was born. My hospital identification bracelet. The same. Serial number matched the one in my birth family's records. There was no denying it anymore. I truly belonged to them. As everyone prepared to leave, the detective said one final sentence that sent chills down my spine. Tomorrow, when the sealed adoption file is opened, everyone in that courtroom will finally learn who changed your life 25 years ago. And somehow, I already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. The courtroom was filled long before the hearing began. Reporters sat in the back row. Hospital representatives occupied one side. My adoptive parents sat quietly beside their attorney. Across the aisle, my biological family sat together. For the first time in 25 years, we were all in the same room, waiting for the truth. I sat between Margaret and Attorney Thomas Green. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The sealed adoption records would finally speak for everyone at exactly 9 o'clock. The judge entered. Everyone stood. After reviewing the case file, he looked around the courtroom. This hearing concerns the unsealing of adoption records created 25 years ago. He paused. The purpose today is not to assign criminal responsibility. It is to determine the truth. Those words mattered, because after 25 years, the truth was all I wanted. The court clerk brought out a large brown envelope. Across the front was stamped, "Sealed by court order." The judge carefully broke the seal. One by one, the documents were placed on the evidence screen. Hospital admission records, birth certificates, medical reports, consent forms, nursing notes, everything. The courtroom remained silent as the judge read. Then he stopped. His expression changed. He adjusted his glasses and looked toward the hospital representative. "Can someone explain why these signatures do not match?" The room froze. A handwriting expert stepped forward. She compared my biological mother's verified signature with the one on the adoption consent. After several minutes, she testified under oath. "In my professional opinion, the signature authorizing the adoption was not written by the same person." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Margaret burst into tears. David covered his face. For 25 years, they had blamed themselves. Now, they finally knew the truth. The hospital administrator stood. He looked devastated. Our internal review found serious failures in record management during that period. He explained that decades earlier, the hospital had outsourced part of its administrative process. Several files had been mishandled. Some adoption documents had been approved without complete verification. He apologized directly to both families. It couldn't erase the past, but it acknowledged the harm. The judge turned toward my adoptive parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper, when did you first learn there were questions about the adoption?" Dad slowly stood. His shoulders were slumped. "About 8 years after we adopted Olivia." The courtroom became silent. The judge frowned. "You knew?" Dad nodded. "We received a letter asking us to contact the agency. We ignored it." My heart sank. "You ignored it?" He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "We were terrified. We thought, if you met your birth family, you'd stop loving us." Mom finally spoke, for the first time that day. She wasn't making excuses. "I was selfish. I loved you. But instead of trusting that love, I chose fear. I convinced myself silence was protecting our family." She wiped away tears. "In reality, it only destroyed it." I sat there quietly. For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I'd feel anger, hatred, revenge. Instead, I felt sadness, because everyone had lost something. My birth family had lost a daughter. My adoptive parents had lost their honesty, and I had lost 25 years with people who had never stopped searching for me. The judge reviewed the final report. The court finds no evidence that the adoptive parents orchestrated the original separation. A quiet murmur spread through the room. However, they knowingly withheld information after becoming aware of the unresolved questions surrounding the adoption. He looked directly at my parents. That decision caused profound emotional harm. My parents lowered their heads. Neither argued. The judge then turned toward me. "Ms. Harper, the law cannot return the years you lost. But today, your original birth records will be restored." He signed several documents. From this day forward, both my original birth certificate and adoption records would be legally available to me for the first time. I finally had the complete story of my life. After the hearing ended, no reporters mattered. No cameras mattered. I walked slowly toward my biological family. Margaret hugged me first, then David, then my cousins. One by one, people I'd never known welcomed me home. No one expected instant perfection. We had 25 years to catch up on, but we finally had the chance. As I prepared to leave the courthouse, Dad quietly called my name. "Olivia." I turned around. He stood alone, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. They never will be." He took a deep breath. "But every birthday, I'll remember what I took from you." I looked at him for a long moment. "I forgive you." His eyes filled with tears. "But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened." He nodded. "I understand." For the first time, neither of us pretended everything was okay, and somehow, that honesty was the beginning of healing. A month later, my biological family invited me to another dinner. Not at an expensive restaurant, not with speeches, not with secrets, just a backyard barbecue. Kids laughed while chasing each other across the grass. Someone burned the hamburgers. Everyone teased each other. Margaret handed me a small chocolate cake. Only 25 candles. She smiled. We figured, you deserve a birthday without heartbreak. Everyone laughed. Then sang Happy Birthday. Halfway through the song, I started crying. Not because I was sad, because for the first time in my life, I didn't wonder whether I belonged. I knew I did. As the sun set, I looked around the yard, at the people who had spent 25 years hoping for this moment. Then I remembered something my grandmother had once told me. You were brought into this family for a reason. Back then, I thought she meant the family that raised me. Now, I realized she meant something much bigger. Sometimes, life gives you two families. One teaches you how to survive. The other reminds you what love truly feels like. And after 25 years, I had finally found both.